because it really made short work of getting through the material that I was reviewing and editing. I really just absolutely should have done that before. And like, I just literally cringe at the amount of hours that I could have saved and could have had for other stuff. It just if I'd had that, because it really saved a lot of time off my day.
Yeah. All right. It is start time. So here we go.
Cybernation Uncensored.
Hello, everybody. This is Star Trek Athena. We're going to be playing live-action Star Trek Adventures game. We're actually picking up at Season 3, but this is the first season. It's going to be on Cybernation Uncensored. So here we are. And also, just so everybody knows, Cybernation Uncensored is sponsored by Modiphius Entertainment. It's very important to acknowledge our sponsors here. So what we're going to do to start with, this is our session 0, where we're basically going to talk about the game. We're going to talk about our characters. We're going to get to know each other a little bit. So we're gonna start by just going around and introducing ourselves. So I'll start with myself. I am GM Drader. I'm the game master. I'm also a full-time freelance game designer, in case you were listening during the countdown. So I've been a fan of Star Trek since about 1982. I've watched pretty much every episode several times. Try to be a lore junkie. Somebody always manages to get one past me here or there, but you know. Anyway, so that's me, and we'll go ahead and move it on to Kronk.
Hello, my name is Kronk. I'm playing Savar. I'm an artist and animator, working on a lot of different projects at one time. The background behind me is one of mine. Besides that, I was raised on Star Trek. I was 5 years old. We have family pictures of me with a T-shirt with the Enterprise logo on it and everything that my father had made me wear. My brother got the command. I got science. Kind of set it up for the rest of our lives because he was telling me what to do, and I like to study computers and science and stuff like that. So, but I've watched a lot of Star Trek. I've been active in a lot of conventions, working everything security and whatnot in that area. And I'm looking forward to it.
All right, and we should also mention, you said that you're an animator. You've worked for Hollywood.
Yes.
So I'd throw that out there. All right.
Yep. Thank you. I was a secondary prop designer, so you'll see a lot of my stuff without me getting a credit. But like you'll see a barrel that might be mine in a movie or whatnot. So it's a really fun job.
All right, Robert.
Robert Emerson. I'm off and on freelance game designer, developer, been editor-in-chief, done some fiction work. Mostly I'm kind of in an idle phase, but I've worked on things from Pathfinder to both first and second edition of it. Most D20 stuff back in the day, wide variety of things. Nowadays, I just do work when I can, but I mainly work at a private nonprofit during the day.
Cool. Now, I hope I get your name correct. Is it Lawanica? Is that how you pronounce that? Hello? Are we frozen up?
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I think he froze.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, we'll skip over to Troy, and hopefully he will be back with us soon.
I'm Troy Mepkins. I am a author, freelancer for Star Trek Adventures. I am a game designer of a 2D20 world builders game called Ashland. Pretty much my only online presence is going to be Facebook for family and friends, but you know, I'm out there.
Cool. So you've worked on Star Trek Adventures, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us some things that you've done for it?
Sure. Ends and Means was my first project, which is a standalone adventure. It was the first one actually published after the launch.
Okay.
And I've got a writing credit in the Klingon rulebook. I did several of the character write-ups for, like, Chancellor Gowron or Gorkin and as it were. And I've done a Klingon adventure. Trying to remember what it's called all of a sudden, but it was my mind. And then a mission briefs collection called Mysteries that are set in the original series era.
Very cool. All right, Eric, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Eric Leonard, and I'll be playing the Benzite McGrib. And at this point, Robert and I are sort of Darren's stalwarts in this particular journey. And I've known Darren a long, long time, since we were small kids.
Grade school
in Washington, yeah. And I'm the outlier here, not involved in the game industry, other than I like to game. I've gamed since Darren and I were little, and I'm kind of notorious as the Star Trek fan that among my friends, family, and coworkers, because I adore all things Star Trek, and I'm planning on getting up probably in the 5 o'clock hour tomorrow to binge the new episodes of Lower Decks before I do anything else, because that's how I cope with everything else.
Is that tomorrow?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that means I need to get caught up on Strange New Worlds then.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm sorry. So let's get back to, is it Lewanika? Is that how you pronounce that?
Lewanika.
Lewanika.
Yeah, Lewanika.
Okay. Lewanika.
Yep,
Okay,
I'm
I'll get
Lewanika
it.
Miller. Yeah, I'm Lewanika Miller. I am one of the 3 co-hosts of Tabletop Journeys. I'm a family man, a podcast host, a writer, a karaoke singer of some note. Many a $100 bar tab night was won by me with the help of my great friends, who actually, as we were starting, just sent me a message telling me they were out singing in Maine as we speak. But I've been a tabletop gamer since 1980 something, very early. That would really show you how old I am. I've been playing since the old Red Box days. I used to play Star Trek FASA when it first came out. So, I mean, I've been at it for more than a minute. I also do some freelance writing, and through my podcast, we are content creators. We're actually in the process of about to kickstart our 4th book as well in the next couple weeks. So in 2 weeks. So we are hard at it. We do a lot of Star Trek on our channel, actual play as well. And this is my great joy that I'm going to get to be on the player side of the screen instead of running the game. So really appreciate the opportunity to sit down and game with new friends, and Kronk, who's been a friend of mine for, again, so many years. We're not going to necessarily throw that out there so we can count them all, but we have seen some shenanigans, I will say. As far as my Star Trek cred, I have probably been watching Star Trek, or at least listening to it, longer than anybody else collected at this table. And I say that because my mother, as a student at Cornell University, used to go to the student union when I was in utero to watch Star Trek on reruns on Saturday nights. So I've literally been Star Trek since before I actually saw air and light. So that's how long I've been in this hobby. Don't speak to me of the old Magix woman. I was there when they were written. That's me. Yeah,
3,000 years ago.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I love Star Trek. I bet it has always been a part of me. I've done fan club groups. I've gone to conventions. One of the highlights of my recent Star Trek fandom is just getting the opportunity to meet and speak with Jonathan Frakes. Was an amazing and moving experience for me on a personal level. So, this is my thing. This is what I'm known for.
Awesome. Hey, Troy, your daughter's in the chat. Princess Anna
I don't doubt
2023. She says, I'm Troy's daughter, so go dad.
every stream I'm in.
Awesome.
My biggest fan. I love it.
Is she a Star Trek fan?
Getting there. I'll convince her.
Yeah. Cool. I was gonna say we should bring her on as a player, but I don't know if I don't know how old she is.
She's 20. She is autistic. So,
Oh, okay.
like I said, it'll take a little convincing, but I'll get her there.
Cool. All right. So I think the smart thing to do here would be to start with a recap of stuff that three of you have no idea about, and the other two of you do because you were there for it. So this campaign actually grew out of a 10th Fleet game, which is a Discord group that was, I want to say it was, 2 or 3 years ago that we started that?
About, yeah.
Yeah, you were there for it. You were there at the very beginning.
Yeah.
And that was Star Trek Callisto.
Yes.
So what ended up happening with that particular group was, the 10th Fleet, they've got a ton of players. They all want to play Star Trek, and you've got players that are leapfrogging from one game to another, from one session to the next, which means you've got like no continuity. And it really started to kind of irritate me after a while, which is why, I stuck it out for as long as Robert did. And then once Robert said, I got to drop, I went a little bit longer and then said, well, I'm going to end this one and regroup and try again. So we ended up starting Athena a few months later. And with that, Robert wasn't there yet. Eric, you're the OG.
Yeah.
And my wife was in as captain because I was having a hard time convincing anybody else to do it.
She did great. It was so much fun to have her. So
yeah, I thought she did good given the fact that she's not a diehard Star Trek fan to begin with, so she doesn't know a lot of the lore. She did a pretty good job for the most part, but after about 6 or 7 sessions, she looks at me one night and just goes, I'm done. Find somebody else. Which is when Robert / Captain Hobbs re-enters the picture. So we had left things off with Captain Hobbs getting abducted from the Callisto. And the Callisto, by the way, was a Sovereign class ship. So you had spent a year being the captive of Malice Salt. And for those of you who are familiar with continuing mission, you might recognize Malice Salt. She's a character that somebody came up with, who's an augment who, well, like I said, she's one of the more popular NPCs at Star Trek Continuing Missions. So I ended up using her as a villain back then, and then I figured, well, it made sense to bring her forward. So we met Captain Hobbs as he was escaping from her clutches.
Escaping, being shot at the sun.
Well, actually, that's true. You weren't escaping so much as she was creating a diversion so that she herself could escape.
Yes. Yeah. She flung me at the sun because I had annoyed her that much.
Yeah, well, that or actually the Athena was about to capture her. So, anyway.
Both.
So that's where you re-entered. But we've got one major storyline that we've been kind of following since the beginning. And I think that, Robert, you're probably the best person to tell this story.
All right. Although I will ask you to say the name of the thing so I don't keep changing it like I keep doing.
Oh, you mean the Shadow Atlas?
Thank you, because I was almost going to say archive yet again.
Mm-hmm.
I internally want to change the name for some reason. I don't think it's a real reason. I just think my brain is hosed. But, so... back before, when he was still with the Callisto and we were out doing things, Hobb may have inadvertently triggered something that Alien and maybe even extragalactic and or at least not in this quadrant kind of fiddled around in his brain and put some information that wasn't there before. And then it just stopped. And he just like, okay, I got some information I don't know what to do with. So we kept doing our thing. He gets captured. He gets flung in a sundae to cover an escape. He gets brought back to the group. And lo and behold, in the middle of all this stuff, commands get switched. He takes over the Athena. And we go back out to the Shackling Expanse yet again, which is where we were. And lo and behold, this whole Shadow Atlas thing keeps getting big and obnoxious until we find out it's a kind of ancient split from the Organians. Because, you know, that's what everybody needs. Let's run into some god things. Nothing, they don't cheat or anything. And make a little bit of a havoc there. Flung a Klingon fleet out of it at one point for fun. To cover our escape because they were trying to steal my ship. And
it's not just that there's a god thing; there's a group of god things. They're
a group of god things. Yes,
they're an offshoot of the Organians.
Yes,
but they've also got a bunch of followers.
Oh, a lot.
Who are cybered up, almost like the Borg, except they look more like H.R. Geiger type cyber dudes, and they're not all wired together like the Borg.
No.
They're definitely individuals, but cybernetics enhancements is definitely part of what they do.
Zealous individuals, like again, they're individuals, but they're all marching in lockstep to some little weird ass group of god things. So yeah,
Space cult with pack.
We found some of the Organians that the god thing they may or may not be linked to is the same god thing that Kirk may have left at the center of the galaxy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, beyond the Great Galactic Barrier, the internal one, not the external one. So,
yep, I went there. I linked this game to Star Trek V.
Yeah.
At least something good came out of it.
I was going to say there's only up to go. I mean,
I'm going to be honest. I actually I have an appreciation for that movie that I think a lot of people don't have.
Obviously,
it has
but at least I recognize that.
I appreciate that they gave us an interesting thing that we could improve with Strange New Worlds regarding Spock's brother. Like, I really loved that. Like, they gave us something that we could also bring up. So I think there's a lot of core lore there that can be expanded on wonderfully.
Mm-hmm. There is always a question of how in the world the Enterprise A, with their technology back then, was able to get to the center of the galaxy in like a couple of days, whereas Voyager would have spent, 30
Several years
there.
Oh yeah,
advanced Vulcan science.
See, I in my headcanon in games I've always played, I always took it as that was actually a local term for what it was, and it wasn't the actual galactic center. It was just what locals in a region of space referred to it as. And that way you could make it anywhere you want at any speed you wanted to get there.
Right.
Well, I will have an answer for you.
Ooh.
It won't be a canon answer. It'll be a game answer. But at this
game
point,
is canon once we're on camera.
Exactly. At this point, the question is kind of moot because ever since Star Trek V happened, and then they did the DC comic that tied really closely into it, and everybody's forgotten all about it ever since then. Like it never happened. Nobody wants to admit that, that they made that. So, so it's really it's a neat part of lore that we can kind of do whatever the heck we want with.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
And they inadvertently threw probably one of the more. I mean, I will fully admit I play Hobbs as a bit of an eccentric captain, but I need to because this is how I relieve the stress of the universe, and I can't do that by being a straight-laced person, so it's just not going to happen. But yeah, Hobbs is a bit of a, I will just say Yankee privateer, I guess is the best way to say it.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't dislike Ferengis as much as some people do. He occasionally pays for things because, well, some cultures demand it. He also occasionally absconds with things because some cultures demand it. But yeah, he's the one being sent to deal with the God thing, which I think will go really high up there on a certain admiral's list of potential bad choices in life, right up there with inadvertently phasing a starship into a rock.
Different admiral. Different.
Oh
admiral.
yeah. Sorry.
That was Pressman, the one we were talking about.
With Cardassians. Is one, yeah. Jellicoe, I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah,
I was mixing the two angry white men together. In my defense, they both have the exact same haircut. The exact same haircut.
I believe it was Admiralty standard at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you're a tall, lean white guy. You get 3B.
Yeah.
Here you go. Yeah, no, I was in the Marines. I remember that haircut. You sit down and a nice family just butchers your head. But yeah, so we've been sent. The Organians gave us some clues, but as usual, for an Organian, they gave us nothing other than, hey, maybe the Enterprise used cultists to get there. Maybe you could use cultists to get there. So I guess we're making a faith engine, which I think there's at least 6 sci-fis with that one, but whatever. We're going to go find some cultists for some blueprints. And they probably don't want to talk to us because nobody believes them. Everybody wants to stop them half the time. So, although in theory, there could be a box somewhere with a Cybok. Yeah, he could be somewhere. We don't know.
These cultists are interesting. They go around telling people they're Vulcans, but they're actually Romulans.
Yep.
So that in a nutshell is where we kind of left off. When you were first approached, it was actually at a space station, way back in the before days of Callisto. And what they planted in your head, it was a series of coordinates, which once you got back to the ship, every screen that you saw was that set of coordinates. Every person that was talking was that set of coordinates until you couldn't get it out of your head anymore. And then you finally put it down. And then you went and investigated, which is when you found the planet where the Shadow Atlas is at. And they tried to blow your ship out of the sky. They weren't even there. It was empty. It was a defense system.
Yeah, it was just a defense system. Then we come back. It's like the Walmart parking lot from hell. There's nothing but spaceships. And that was even worse.
So they were pretty much convinced that they were going to take on the crew of the Athena as new followers, and they were going to take the Athena itself as a gift.
Yeah,
which you weren't too cool with.
No, I was already in the process of blowing up the ship. I removed every safety I could. I had it set to trigger to start the explosion or start the countdown based off how far they were getting along and hacking through the encryption. I was not a helpful person. I may have insulted someone's mother straight to their face. I mean, I was very much. I'm pretty sure I violated at least a dozen, social norms per Starfleet when dealing with a new culture. I was not a nice person. They took my ship.
They did. They took your ship, and fortunately, you managed to get an SOS out to Starfleet. The Klingons were the nearest ones to that, them being an ally of the Federation. They came in by force and basically helped extract you from the situation.
Oh, they were terrific. I was happy with the Klingons. We had a party after.
Lots of blood wine.
Lots of blood wine. Very much thankful.
So that's basically the overstory that's going on. We do also intersperse that with one-offs or short series, much like you'll find with any regular Star Trek series. So we're less likely to do a big long Discovery-like arc as we are to do like an episode. Oh, we're back on the main storyline, an episode, that sort of thing. So why don't we? I know you guys haven't had a whole lot to say because you know new guys because you weren't here for all this. But I think we more or less got you up to speed as far as what's come before. You guys are going to be new transfers onto the ship. I haven't quite decided what happened to the old XO, other than the fact that she said that she wasn't really up on her Star Trek lore to the point where she was interacting as well as she thought she wanted to, which is why we just decided it was time for a reset. So anyway, why don't we start with Kronk? Kronk, why don't you tell us about your character?
I'm playing Savar, the son of Varg. He's a Klingon and Vulcan, half and half, if you will, with a Klingon father and a Vulcan mother. He was raised on the Klingon homeworld and studied at the Klingon Academy of War Science, which was more war than science, but he did learn some basic astrophysics and some other things that were kind of useful. Enough to get him into Starfleet, because the deal was that he was raised by his Klingon father and then later educated by his Vulcan mother. Unfortunately, his father was killed in battle, and so he was sent to live with his mother and entered Starfleet, the Science Academy, because he could not get into the Vulcan Science Academy. So he went Starfleet instead, where upon graduation, he was drafted into Section 31. Where for 2 years he did some stuff, very redacted. It's got periods, and the word "and" is in there, and a couple thes. And other than that, everything has been removed. But in 2376, towards the end of the Cardassian War, the Cardassians found out his identity because he was an infiltrator and saboteur, and they released it. So he had to go into hiding for a few years. And where he learned how to deal, and he started studying logic, and that way he could control the fact that he had killed an awful lot of people as a saboteur during the Cardassian Wars, or the Dominion Wars. He calls it the Cardassian Wars because most of what he did was against the Cardassian forces. And they hate him. It gave him a very infamous level with them. They tend to growl, if not do worse, when they see him because he's done the worst. Nothing war crime level, but he'd go on a ship and infiltrate it, and somehow the shuttle would leave, but the ship would blow up, killing everybody on board. Bases would fall, shields wouldn't be working at the right times, things like that. And he was the one that they found out did it. So now he's returning, but they won't let him work for Section 31 anymore because any form of infiltration or cover has thoroughly been ruined. And he's now just a normal science officer, and this is his first posting. And
we're actually excited to have an actual science officer as part of our player group, because before we didn't, and Eric ended up having to kind of double as the science officer when we needed roles and stuff like that.
Yeah, I can double as the tactical officer as well. My security is almost as good as my science, but don't let me do much else. Yeah.
All right, so Robert, I know you've already told us a little bit about Captain Hobbs, but let's go ahead and hear the full spiel.
All right, so Hobbs he had a reputation during his time in the academy. I mean, literally at least one or two of his tactical trainers started referring to him as Black Bart. Possibly also due to the fact that some of them claimed that there were privateers in his family tree way back in the day. So he came up through the engineering path. He was much more of a combat engineer, or at least a combat systems and defense systems engineer. He does some amazing things with tactical systems, transporters, replicators, phasers. He also does a lot of asymmetrical thinking at times when it comes to certain things. He's an okay captain. He will definitely keep you thinking there's a ball in the air. He's not as much A to B to C as he is look at B and jump toward E. But he's just as good at command as he is engineering. A little bit okay in the sciences, but mostly command and engineering. Very adaptive, very promptive. He does like to get off the bridge way too much. I mean, there's potential rumor that some folks feel he might have been made a captain because they were hoping it would calm him down a little bit. So, now he dresses like a captain, although he still seems to wear that more adventure jacket than that actual straight up regular uniform, and he still pretty much always has at least a phaser on him, and he still pretty much always has a tricorder on him somewhere because he's tired of being kidnapped without having stuff. Not that it's happened too much. He's currently a little bit paranoid. I will definitely share that. But he cares about his crew a lot. He cares about his ship a lot. Although he did recently get in an argument with a part of his ship. But that's not my fault.
Janeway's fault
first. Yes, it's Janeway's fault. Janeway didn't check the attachments on her email.
It was a Borg virus. They're sending you some Borg information for you to use. You're trying to access the hyperspace, or not the hyperspace, but the
transwarp tunnels.
Transwarp tunnels. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
And it just so happened to have a Borg virus attached that was trying to turn the Athena into a Borg ship. Now, I did promise you that you weren't going to encounter the Borg in this campaign.
Yes.
I never said anything about a Borg virus.
Yep.
Nice.
So so Hobbs is very much an independent thinker. He likes giving his crew a lot of room to work with. He does believe and trust in Starfleet, like to a very high degree. Like he does believe in that whole concept of Starfleet as a family. They'll come running for you. They also might yell at you and throw things at you, but they'll come for you, at least hopefully more often than not.
Angelica loves to yell at you. I said Angelica loves to yell at you.
He loves it, but he keeps calling me. I think he likes how often I get things done.
And we are going with the whole notion that Jellicoe was promoted to Admiral after we saw him in Chain of Command back on TNG. They actually did that in the novels, which of course are not canon, but it always made sense. And I think they actually did that in Prodigy too, didn't they?
Yeah, he was an admiral in Prodigy.
So cool.
And you saw a lot more confirmation of some of the people that they assumed would be full-on admirals or even higher in Prodigy.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's the one show I haven't kept up on, and now that they've yanked it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. It was terrific. I mean, I am a firm believer it's a great show.
Absolutely brilliant program. I am so glad I took the effort to not watch other things to make sure I got that up to speed, because at the point they announced how fast it was going away, I would not have had enough time to catch up if it had not been something I had already watched.
Yeah.
There was just
it's still the weirdest thing. Like I can't. It makes no sense in my brain as something that was that successful. Like given the fact that it was specifically being aimed at kids, yet it was drawing a larger number than kid stuff usually draws, and then they just tossed it. So
yeah,
they deserve better.
Hey, we got a comment here from the chat. Polar Knights. I love the show. It's a perfect evolution of beard growth. That is so true.
It is.
So true.
It is.
Yeah, if it wasn't for my BiPAP, this would be normal length, but I had to decide to live.
Yeah.
See, I'm firmly convinced once you hit about 40 years old, facial hair becomes a thing for most people. for most men, anyway.
Yeah. I can
we don't
honestly
care enough to shave.
I can honestly say I never shaved before basic training. They made me shave in basic, and I didn't have to. And for 10 years after basic training, I never shaved. And then I turned 40-ish, and all of a sudden it's like, what's this shaving thing regularly? And dang, razors are expensive.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
first thing that happened after I got out of the Marines, I'm like, okay, stop shaving. I don't want to do it again. Initially it was just the mustache, but eventually I'm like, I hate shaving, and I just don't. Like, I haven't actually seen my face. I haven't been clean shaven in probably almost 30 years.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's that DD-214 stubble. That's what that is. We've all who've been in have had it at some point. I mean,
yeah, I think I've rocked the goatee ever since about 2000 when I was working for Wizards of the Coast, and at that time I just, I didn't want to look like the fresh-faced kid, so grew the goatee and it just kind of stuck.
Well, I did it. Like, I did not look my age until I probably hit, like, I finally started my face finally started to catch up with my age about mid-40s. Like, prior to that, if I were to clean shave, it's like seeing Blaster from Master Blaster. There's no happiness there. It's just a giant fleshy knob that just does no. Yeah.
I originally started with a goatee and facial hair because it and shaved my head bald because it perfected my Cisco cosplay back in the mid 90s. But I was so bad at growing facial hair, and Sheldon remembers this. I actually had to pencil in the bald spots with Sharpies just to make it look real. Like, it was bad.
I was making fun of him too.
For 10 years, he's like, "What is that really close?" And you're like, "Let me get that. Let me get that." Terrible. Thanks, my friend.
So
I appreciate that. Great memory.
Are we done with Hobbs?
I think Hobbs is fairly. I mean, he's played by Nick Frost for a reason. Like, Hobbs is a very open book. Unfortunately, you might not be looking at the right pages at certain moments, but he is definitely a very improvisational captain.
Cool. Okay, so I guess the next most logical place to go would be to the XO, our new XO. So it's Commander Proso Shakun. Is that how you pronounce that?
Correct, Shakun. I will just say this about the open book that is my captain. The prophets do teach us that when you open the holy text to a random page, it will provide the wisdom you need for what you approach next.
All random pages.
So, Proso Shakun is a Bajoran, and played by myself. He is average height, fairly fit, but we're not talking gym rat fit. He's just, generally speaking, in good shape. Takes fairly good care of himself. He grew up in a bit of a hard scrabble life. For those who are fans of the Player's Guide, I used the alternate background, hardship and struggle. And his story is quite simple. He grew up in one of the colonies that was in the contested area of space between Bajor and Cardassia. He grew up pre-Dominion War, while the Maquis were still doing their thing. He was a younger to older teen during those struggles. By the time of the Dominion War, when many of those colonies were being mandatorily evacuated or simply captured and condemned, that's the world he grew up in and came to life. He was not really alive for the occupation, but he certainly was alive for the aftermath and the struggles that followed it before the start of the DS9 series. His father is I have to get the name of this correct here. His father was not a supporter of the Maquis, but a religious figure. Had they grown up on Bajor, likely would have risen to the rank of Vedic. But as a colony world, that level of power wasn't there, but he was definitely a community leader.
Prylar.
Prylar, thank you. And his mother, however, was a bit of a Maquis supporter. So he comes from a bit of a split family paradigm. And mostly because the struggle, believed in the struggle. So Shakun is definitely a child of those two different mentalities. Look, there's a way to do things. There's an order to the world. There's an order to get things done. There's a right way to do things. There's a process. And then there's sometimes that process fails and people just have to do things. So he is of those two minds. He is a strong believer in the prophets, the power and the strength of his own pa and the pa of those around him. In fact, one of his areas of study is xenotheology. He looks for the faith in all peoples. He and has actually joined Starfleet originally, thinking that he might end up being a chaplain of sorts. The Dominion War, other things took place. He ended up being a con officer initially, but his natural presence, strength of person, dedication to his various crews and the people around him, and Starfleet as a whole, led him into more and more command features, and eventually to his posting as XO for the Athena. Yeah, definitely a person who likes his crew, wants to get to know them. He is far from by the book, but he's very good at using the book to get to the results that are desired. He definitely is that kind of person, but it definitely wants to get to know the people in his command, find out what they are like, what their needs are, what he can do to help them achieve their individual greatness. Basically, what he can do to strengthen the pa and all of those around him, because that strengthens the pa of the crew as a whole.
So one thing that might be kind of interesting to do is figure out why Captain Hobbs chose Shakun as the new first officer. Any thoughts?
I mean, I could see him potentially wanting to make sure to have someone a little bit more grounded than him around.
Right?
Like, he already... I mean, again, as an example... One of the things Hobb did while looking for Salt after trying to figure out what happened and where things were going, he may have briefly turned his captain's yacht into a maybe kind of privateer vessel, and maybe kind of showed up dressed like a pirate, and maybe had to turn over at least one disruptor that he got a hold of. No, that was not taking it. I was neutralizing it. Even though he only remembered later. Yeah. So he probably realized at some point, I might need a little bit more of a grounded voice in one of my ears to turn to, because we're about to go into some really harsh territory. Also, he probably wanted someone who's a little bit more, has a different outlook than he does on God things. And maybe someone who's a little bit less rejecting as he is about some of that. I mean, Hobbs gets really mouthy with superpowered things. I mean, I will honestly say at one point he was trying to see if he could bait Q to show up because he was tired of dealing with these people. He was hoping they didn't like Q, so maybe if I say Q enough times, he'll show up.
Oh yeah, that was one of the things that we forgot to mention in our recap is that their backstory is that they were at one point at war with the Organians. So it's Organian versus Organian. The Organians basically went to Q and asked, could you please resolve this peacefully because we're tired of fighting them. So he took the Shadow Atlas and marooned them outside of the galaxy.
Yeah.
And that's where they've been for thousands of years.
And they don't like him at all.
They don't particularly. Well, it wasn't necessarily John Delancey's Q. It was just the continuum. One of the Q within the continuum.
One of them.
And the Q continuum, being seemingly at the top of the ladder, no longer bother with even the Organians. So trying to bring them in to sort this all out now that they're coming back, probably not going to work out too well.
It was worth a shot. Again, I wasn't pleased with even trying it, but at the same time, I mean, sometimes you gotta look in the mirror and scream Candyman. I mean, you want things to get fixed. And you don't really care whose blood has the hands on it.
Interestingly enough, Shakun is a player of Domjot and is actually quite willing to take chances. He would say just the calculated ones, but that's probably not entirely accurate. As anyone playing Domjot, certainly with Nausicaans, will likely find out that there's an amount of risk that cannot be calculated properly. So, it is what it is. So I think he would likely have been certainly in the folder of options simply on the basis of his second mission was a first contact mission. His xenotheology, especially if you're dealing with people who believe that whatever they're dealing with is a deific presence, being a member of a very faithful species and culture that other people just view as special high-powered aliens. He's a very good bridge. He's very well and logically aware that other people view them as powerful aliens. So his specific beliefs on what's a god and what's not a god is very personal. And at the end of the day, it's really what the person believes to him, or what that culture believes. It doesn't matter what it actually is or isn't. So for him, it's easier for him to bridge that. Okay, that's your god. Well, let's speak to them in a way that makes sense to you, but let's come to an accord. My gods deal with people in a specific way. How do your gods deal with people in their way? And then that kind of communication, he's very good at that. It's basically an extended and larger first contact issue for him, and that's kind of where he's cut his teeth in Starfleet.
Cool. All right, let's talk about Dr. Bachman.
Alrighty. Dr. Bachman, Dr. Levi Bachman, is from Sherman's Planet. Those of you who are original series fans, you'll recognize that name from Trouble with Tribbles. It is a farm planet, so he grew up on a farm, mainly grain farming, but there was animal husbandry, that kind of thing. He always helped out on the farm. When he got a little bit older, probably between 10 and 12, he started helping out the local veterinarian, just taking care of the animals, learning how to determine illnesses and that kind of thing. And then as he got older, he got into emergency medicine, that kind of thing. Interestingly enough, he would probably find the commander incredibly interesting, because Bachman can trace his family lineage back about 500 or 600 years to Mennonite communities on Earth. And his family and the community that he grew up in on Sherman's Planet hold very tightly to the ideals of community, hard work, piety, not even necessarily spirituality, but a high moral standard. He is technically a pacifist. He won't kill ever. It's just not something he'll do. When he was at the academy, he of course had to deal with phasers and that kind of thing, but he's very much, if he's ever handed a phaser, he'll disable everything that could possibly make it lethal before he would ever put it on his belt. He ended up in Starfleet Academy. The people on his planet, his family, his community realized, he had a gift. He was a healer. He had empathy. And he ended up in Starfleet Academy, graduated with honors from the medical academy. He is a doctor of osteopathy, so he believes in prevention more than cure. He is a practitioner of traditional medicines as well, so he will look for more holistic solutions if they're available, but he's also versed in cutting-edge medical technology as well. So he's kind of that blend between, you know, the old and the new. He is very much a driven doctor. You know, this is his passion. This is what he does. This is who he is. He does have a few things that he likes to do in his off time. He is actually an accomplished pianist and is a composer. So if you pass by his quarters, sometimes you'll hear the piano going, and it's just, that's how he unwinds. That's how he thinks, you know, and just kind of lets his mind go. He is also a cook. He likes to cook traditional, you know, Amish, Mennonite, Pennsylvania Dutch, you know, kind of foods. And I think it more just reminds him of home. You know, it's one of those things with him. But his ideals when it comes to Starfleet is, you know, yes, I am Starfleet. Yes, I am, you know, a member of the crew of this ship. But I am a doctor first and foremost. And officer comes a distant second. You know, as far as he's concerned, there are no enemies in sickbay. He doesn't care who winds up on his table. He's going to try to save their life. And that's, you know, just kind of the way he is. He's just a very idealistic, you know, he's young enough yet. He's, you know, in his early 30s. So, you know, and he was raised that way.
Cool.
It's going to be weird for having a chief medical officer that won't do a war crime. Mind you, I was not involved with the last one.
I was going to say, I think our science officer's got us covered in that department.
I got that. I got that for you.
And
by the way, apparently Commander Tobor is in the chat.
Hey, hello, Commander.
Cool.
Excellent.
All right, so is that pretty much the what we need to know about Dr. Bachman?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Eric, tell us about McGrib, and start with reminding us what a benzite is.
They're the other alien species with a B, not to be confused with the blue head, single line on the forehead, or ridges. You know, they're not barbers. You know, these are the guys that in early TNG, you know, also had the, you know, breathing apparatus, you know, in front of their mouth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, later in TNG, that's been removed. The benzites don't speak as to why they can breathe oxygen atmospheres now. There are rumors of genetic engineering, and that may or may not have put Federation, you know, membership at risk. They, you know, benzites have two thumbs, so they, you know, they like to surf. No, they don't. They're, you know, science-oriented, group-oriented people, and, you know, McGrib's gonna really appreciate being able to just go to engineering and do engineering as opposed to pinch hitting engineering and science.
Although you're very good at it, I got to say.
Yeah, most days.
He did well.
So one of the things I kind of wanted to mention here is, you know, my style as a GM of Star Trek. I know that the rules are set up to where, you know, you're sitting here and something weird's going on, and I can make a roll, and, you know, then I've got to like be, hey, you know, you think it's this, right? One thing I'd like to see a little bit more of is, you know, everybody here is like experts on Star Trek lore. You know, you understand kind of how subspace works. You understand how temporal anomalies work, you know, things like that. So what I'd kind of like to see more of, especially with this group, is, you know, you've run into something weird. I'd kind of like to see you guys like put your heads together and like, you know, be like, hey, what do you think? Could it be, you know, could it be this? You know, because we saw it in this episode, or, you know, we've heard about this or that, or, you know, I think that could be applying to our situation in this way, you know, and then do a roll. And if you're completely lost, then sure, you know, we could always do a science roll or something like that. But I'd kind of like to see a little bit more you know, a little bit more interaction as far as just trying to solve the scientific mysteries with the information that we think we possess as fans.
Hamster wheels at 7,500 RPMs. Gotcha.
I'm not going to give away the secret that I have 3 different Technobabble apps at the ready at any given moment, and that I abuse YouTube for all the science and Space Now and Space Race and exploration of the universe and James Webb sites. If it's a science vid on space and it's 15 minutes or less, I'm probably watching it within 20 minutes of it. Within 2 days of it coming out, I've watched it. I subscribe to like 3 or 4 different channels, and because that's how my brain works. I always want to know more about that stuff. It feeds my Star Trek. So, yeah.
I was going to say, I've got 3 or 4 different Star Trek medical journals. So,
Cool. I had one of my argumentation professors back when I was finishing my degree was told the class one time, because they kept answering certain things, and he just looked at the class and he's like, yes, it's like Mr. Emerson has the internet in his head, we know. I'm an infovore. I'll read anything and everything if I can get a hold of it, and then throw the garbage out and keep the good stuff.
I'm one of those people. Every time a like an astronomy story comes through my feed on Facebook, I will click the link and first figure out, is this something I've read before, or is this something that's like brand new? And like today, I was reading about how black holes feasting on stars are known to belch up a bunch of stuff, and apparently this is new information. Although it sounds a lot like Hawking radiation that was just, it's been known for a while, or at least anyway
theorized,
but not witnessed.
Right,
not witnessed.
Yeah. I'm actually known for watching the silent videos that just show the computer modeling of galaxies striking each other, which is like billions of years to have even the slightest movement. But I'm actually I'm watching, I'm like, wow, if you were in a star system there and all this is happening around you, could you imagine just seeing when these other parts connect? Like, how close would you have to be before that becomes the thing that lights up your night sky for the rest of your life? Those kinds of things. I'm like all about it. Just utterly fascinating.
I like the fun, spooky stuff that people don't think about until you point it out. And then once you point it out, they're like, look at you going, why did you tell me that? Like my personal favorite, figure out what the nearest star is. Yeah. Everything beyond that star could be dead right now, and we won't know for at least a year.
Yep.
And they're like, wait, what? I go, yeah, everything could be dead right now. Whole entire universe. We're just waiting for the light to catch up with us. They're like, that's not funny. I'm like, oh, it's hilarious. It's just scary and creepy and terrible.
Well, a lot of people don't realize that we're going to collide with the Andromeda Galaxy in about 1 billion years.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. That's the model I was watching. It's a great light show. I just don't want to be in this seat when it happens.
I'm glad that none of us are going to be around in 1 billion years, because who knows what's going to happen? I mean, nothing. It could go anywhere from nothing will happen at all to we're going to get flung out of the solar system and freeze to death.
It'll be Y2 billion and K.
Or it could even be
good money off that thing. I can't make fun of that too much.
It could even be we get smashed by a star or get sucked into a black hole. That could also happen.
I just want like a dense stellar object just to skim the solar system enough to shake up the billiard balls a little bit, and then we'll see what happens. One of those ones where it just comes just close enough that you think everything's fine, and then suddenly we get that one feeling that we've never had, which is the planet just moving. We're okay with it moving because we don't feel that moving. But could you imagine the one where you notice things are moving, but you still don't feel moving? Yeah, that's going to have to be. That's on that list of just no frame of reference, but
well, it's all fun and games.
If you ever want to hear a good talk about, if you ever want to hear about galaxies colliding, talk to Michael Dice-Muke about Centaurus A.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
In the last 4 years. Because I've been captain of the Pioneer it'll be 4 years in December, and most of that has been spent in the Centaurus A galaxy that is actually the product of two colliding galaxies.
Nice.
Which I never knew until I joined that game.
Okay.
Yep.
And if you want to know where your godlings came from, look that direction.
Cool.
I remember that you mentioned that actually when we had our kind of pre-chat here.
Yep.
And for those who don't know, Michael Dysmuke, he is one of the guys. He was really involved with Star Trek continuing missions, and is now very much involved with Modiphius and producing new content for Star Trek Adventures.
Yep.
So.
He's the lead writer on the brand new Captain's Log book, which
It's awesome.
right here in my hot little hands. So he's the lead writer on that book, and he's been a contributing freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures for longer than I've been actually playing the game. I've only been in the game for a little over a year at this point, but he's actually one of the very first people that reached out to me when I was asking questions about it. He's like, "Let's talk," and we just started talking. Amazing human being, human being. Like, my advice to the world is if you have a moment to meet this person, do so. You will be better for the effort.
Robert and I actually have.
Excellent.
Yeah, we interviewed him on the.
It was RPG with R&D, my short-lived Let's Talk About RPGs podcast. And I kind of ran out of steam on that one, to be honest with you. Just as far as, booking people and talking for an hour and all this stuff, it's like, I'd rather be playing games.
Yeah.
So he was definitely one of the people that we had, and we had a great time talking to him about Star Trek Adventures and other things.
Yeah, he's been on our show once. We've been on his show with Jim. I've been on there like continuing conversations. I think I've been on 3 times now, and we actually just had Jim on our show last week. That episode dropped last Friday, I think it was. Yeah, last Friday that one dropped. I've talked with him many times. Haven't met him in person yet. Look forward to those days. Great conversation, and I think podcast is a weird thing. The secret is don't be a one-person shop. Like, I would not be able to have been doing it for 3 years if I was doing it alone, for 2 reasons. I play somebody who's good with computers and technology on a podcast, right? That's it, right? I am probably closer to being a doctor than I am at being good at technology. That's just a fact. Now, I learn well, and once somebody takes the time to work through my brain space to teach me a task, I get very good at that task. And so, I become the editor for our podcast because it took me a while, but it took me about a year to get good at that piece. But yeah, it's all about having a team. It's very much, I liken it to running a starship. If you have the right people in the right places, things move so well and so fast, you don't even recognize that it was hard work. It's when you are missing a piece that it becomes hard work.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, indeed.
All right, so let's talk to Kronk a little bit. Kronk, you've already done some 3D modeling related to this game.
Yes, I'm designing a new version of the Athena, as well as some uniforms and stuff like that. The characters, we're going to have tokens animated, as well as portrait pictures for our Roll20, and probably some hallways and maps and stuff as we go. Things that I'm going to make some stuff that Darren can use to also torture us.
As one does.
Yes, absolutely. All of my models have to be a little different due to copyright factors and stuff, but they're going to be really close. So if you notice a difference in the audience, please don't necessarily feel you have to point it out to me, because I probably did it on purpose, so I won't get a cease and desist order from Paramount.
Right.
Yeah.
What?
And it's kind of funny because I've mentioned to you before that, it's no big deal. This is just Star Trek Adventures and people do it all the time. And you're like, but
yes,
you actually you know,
I've
you
received
actually
one
work in
already.
Hollywood.
Yeah.
For a lot of their fan policy and stuff, if you look at it, it specifically is not for me, professionals in the industry. I'll get sued if I drop like the uniforms I made for like my character. They are vastly different, but still the same. They look like Starfleet uniforms, but the color pattern is gray, like gray on the shoulders and different things, but it's not quite any uniform in existence. And that's so it's my own design. So the ship will get slightly different uniforms that will match the fact that allow us to do a lot of art and other stuff because we want to do that also. Some new videos are coming. I've just worked on some teleporter or transporter effects. So we'll be able to do that. And I have a number of different ones. So hopefully we can pick one we like. We're going to wind up with some, you know, I'm working on a nebula right now because every intro needs a nebula. And so we're going to be basically, well, hopefully, you know, upgrading a lot of the quality and the CGI of a lot of video that you normally find in podcasts.
I'm just going to throw throw my hat in and say that if every podcast needs a little bit of nebula, I'm going to say I believe you misspoke and meant to say saber, and Commander Tobor will probably agree with me on that one.
Oh no, nebula, the big gas giant in the sky in space. Nebula.
Oh, the nebula, not the ship.
Nebula. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
We need a nebula, big gaseous giant. An X.
You know, the thing that gives us space clouds.
Yes, excellent. And color. Fair enough. Yes. Needs one of those and a saber. I'm just saying.
Yes, and a saber.
I'm really looking forward to seeing what you come up with as far as, you know, 3D models, like, you know, the maps and stuff like that. Because, like for the when I was doing the Callisto, you know, back in the day, I had gone online and I had found people who'd mapped out certain sections of the ship, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna use this, and I put it into a wiki page, and it was all nice and good, and nobody ever referred to it or used it or anything. And then after that, I was like, man, you know, it's cool that we're doing the Athena now, and I'd love to have that. I just don't I don't feel like putting forth the effort.
I think I looked at it just to keep track of the number. Because I know that's what I did when we did the transporter trick, when the one planet was kablooeying and we had to evacuate the population. And I figured out the math and the trick. So I figured out that the ship had enough shuttles, primary, secondary, and runabouts that we could actually do a transporter bridge from one planet to the other planet in the system if we stretched them out. Because I looked up the range for transporters and everything, and I mean, I came up with, I feel, a very engineering decision that didn't involve blowing anything up, and we just basically transported the planet population in series, just across from shuttle to shuttle to shuttle to shuttle to ship to shuttle. You know, like I think it ended up being like a 40-something jump.
Yeah, it was pretty significant.
You know, the funny thing, like way too many extra ships. Like,
you know, the funny thing about that adventure was, though, that was one of those adventures where I went into it with some notes, and I hadn't quite figured out what the solution to everything was going to be. So we're sitting here and we're playing, and I'm hoping that the players come up with something, because if not, the planet was going to get destroyed. And there's going to be a lot of dead people. So. So it was pretty ingenious that he came up with the transporter bridge and put that into effect. Because, like I said, it was a matter of how do we evacuate all of these people from one area to another area without having, you know, like one ship is not going to be able to do it simply because you don't have the cargo capacity, you know. So that was a pretty cool session. And again, that was back in the Callisto days.
Well, it's because matter transportation, if it ever was somehow made real, isn't. I mean, the degree to which it's a game changer is just nuts. Like, I mean, it's something that if it were real or if it ends up being feasible, I mean, even if it's just for data, it's going to be insane.
Oh,
Right.
By orders of magnitude, it dwarfs any of the lightning rod discoveries that we as mankind has ever had. It is by orders of magnitudes more impressive. I mean, the wheel was pretty impressive, or fire was pretty impressive. The wheel was pretty impressive. The printing press was very impressive. Steam power was very impressive, even though it was already done before we did it again, because humans are idiots and we forget stuff. Great computers, great nuclear power, fantastic. If we get fusion, even better. But matter transfer, that's a whole different thing. It eliminates the need for travel or power to travel, as long as you can power the matter transfer. But at that point,
because energy is an item that could also be teleported. That's the whole point. If you have matter teleportation or matter movement of any kind that way, you can then do energy as well.
Yeah, imagine teleporting elements of the sun to a station to power something. Done. Problem solved. It's insane what you could do.
There's still the philosophical question of, okay, somebody steps on a transporter, they're broken down into their component parts, beamed to another place, and then reassembled. Is it still that person, or have you killed the original person and created a new one? This is a serious thing that Trekkies argue about. Any thoughts?
Oh, yeah.
I've already teleported once, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
I no longer think of it because I've already teleported that one time.
The fact that you could likely have been teleported in utero means the game's over. You might as well just keep and roll with it. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? But I would certainly, whenever they show in the show somebody who's like, "No, I'm not doing that." I'm like, I get you. I can tell you, Lee Wanika goes that far in the future. Like, step on this thing, we're gonna blow you up and put you back together. I'm like, the hell you are. I will be like B.A. Baracus. You're gonna have to put something in my milk before you get me on one of those.
I'll be Dr. McCoy right now. Going, is there some reason you want my atoms scattered all over?
Good thing I can double-handed nerve pinch. All I'm saying.
Right? Yeah. Well, that's Lee Wanika. My character has no problem with it. That's just the way we do things, right? Lee Wanika? No.
Exactly.
Sedius, aka Tobor, Commander Tobor, in the chat goes, "It's not murder."
Technically, it's. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. I will stop that train of thought.
Yeah, I'm right where there with you.
Yeah.
I always say the weird one is, if it was never truly given as a problem, it's not a problem. It's just meant to be a character development point. McCoy hated the things, but as you may have noticed, up until he got really high in rank, he still had to do it.
Yep.
Then one day he gets high enough in rank that nope. Now you got to go pick me up. Now you got to send your android to get me. Everything's fine.
But what's funny is McCoy had to argue with him about doing it, but Spock rolled in on a shuttle. And we wonder why he would go on and on about that green-blooded bastard.
Well, and let's also look at the fact that in Star Trek, it doesn't necessarily matter whether you're the original person or an exact copy. Because if you're an exact copy, you are accepted as the original. We saw this with Spock. We saw this kind of with Harry Kim in one episode. There are other examples.
I mean,
we got two Rikers.
Where'd you get the second life force for the second Riker? I mean, that to me says that life force energy can be transported too, because it's also energy. So therefore, if it can be duplicated, that's how you had two Rikers. So if you want to look at it that way, then I think, yes, it's not murder. Your life force does get transported as it is part of the energy of your body.
And it's a perfect transfer unless you leave your copy on a horribly angry planet for like what 7 years or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, and then you get like slightly more angry, slightly more independent Riker, which is really weird because he's already slightly angry, slightly more independent Riker. So
he's a copy, so he's not quite perfect. There are little tiny little spaces that are missing in his code. That's all.
Yeah.
See, I always thought that it was. I always looked at it as that's exactly like it's almost like that perfect question. Like, what if I was freed from the decisions that I felt I had to make and just got to make the decisions that I wanted to make? What would that be? And that's where I think Thomas Riker really came to life and was really cool. I think that's what Deanna was really engaged with, because Thomas is like, what do you mean I was leaving? I was going to stay. So you almost got this. I was coming right back. Like this wasn't going to be over. And he was like pissed at his older self for having decided to stay away. So it's almost like anytime you had that moment, and we all have them, where we have that moment to say, should I go left or should I go right? If you were transported at that moment, it happened to be split. One of you's going left, one of you's going right. And what would have happened? What would your life have been? And I think that's really interesting to think about. It really is the great what if. Like, I don't need Stan Lee to put out this great comic book, because we literally in Star Trek have the ability to answer that question.
Well, there's a power that comes with being unmoored. I mean, sometimes you have yourself so set on a path that what you see is that path. But if suddenly, through no fault of your own, that path is just removed, it's done. Like there's a lot of, long as you still have the same opportunity that you had when you were on it, there's a lot of difference you can do. I mean, I mean, not to share too much personal information. That's what I did in my real life. I spent 17 years working in corporate IT and stuff, and money was great, but it wasn't really much satisfaction in it, because like I think over the course of my IT career, longest I worked for any one place was maybe 3 years. Went back to school, decided to get a bachelor's of psychology, and an associate's in criminal justice. I now work at a nonprofit law firm, but I've been with this company now, or with the nonprofit now, for about 3-4 months, over 11 years. Like, I have been with this employer longer than I've been with any almost 4 employers in my prior career. Like, and that took a complete unhinge, just yanked everything out from under my life. Went from Boise back to my hometown, unhinged everything. Like, it was chaotic and stressful and horrible, but it gave me the ability to completely change who I was as a person. Same thing, I think, if you could make copies of yourself. There's a David Brin novel called Kiln People, Kiln, and then people. And so obviously part of the pun in it is killing people. Right. But the whole premise of the thing is it's in a society that now has the ability to make copies of, you could almost call them like paper mache copies. I can't remember what the exact kiln process is, but it makes multiple copies of yourself, and depending on what you do and the resources you put into it, they can be really simple copies who are capable of running errands for the store or whatnot for you, to more complex copies that can do like severely task-oriented portions of your day. Main character in the book is a private detective who sometimes sends some of his copies out. Now, they're supposed to be, when those copies go out, they're supposed to come back. You're supposed to re-download what they did in their days into your brain, so suddenly you have all these experiences and whatnot. However, sometimes if really bad things happen to them, you don't do that, because your copy lost its arm today because it got hit by a bus. Do you really want that downloaded into your brain? So it sets up a whole big long thing. But the key part was each one of those things is literally is you. It's just, there's the one you that, they might not, you might not want that version of you cleaning your sidearm, but they're really great at cleaning up the house. Like you have all these different versions, but at the end of the day, they all still want to be you. So like if you're splitting your consciousness into things, or if you're transporting your body to get split or whatever, the only part of you that's really you is your brain, is you that in there. So if that is copyable, if that is transferable, wherever that goes, that's you. I mean, I make jokes all the time, even before I had my heart attack, and now I got to live with all that crap. But I always joked about is there a body you can download me into? I'll resleeve. Let's go. I mean, like, this thing is not happy. I broke it before the Marine Corps. I broke it in the Marine Corps. Like, someone's going to offer me a brand new, better version. Oh, wait, this one's like some jacked up Eastern European version? Yeah, okay, yeah, sure, give me. You know, gonna throw a couple extra parts in, give me some Spider-Man web shooters? Great. Like, I'll jump on that. But again, that's because this is the you. This is the apparatus we engage with everything around us.
Yep. Oh, you look at Scotty in Relics.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, he was in there for how long?
70.
It's still him.
Years? Yeah.
Yep.
I personally would settle for me sometime circa day my semi-pro football days. I was in great shape.
Right.
I was solid. I mean, I was looking pretty good back then.
It would take me 3 weeks out of boot camp. I wouldn't take me right out of boot camp because I was a diet private, and oh man, I went from 214 to 173 in 30 days. Do not ever do that, human being. Children out there, don't. If someone tells you it's a good idea, don't. It's as dumb as cutting weight. But no, I came back 3 weeks after that when I was at home. I probably hit my ideal weight where I was maybe 5% body fat. Yeah, I'd take that version of me. That version of me was that version of me was a lot better looking than I realized at the time.
When your kid looks at your high school picture and goes, "Who's that?"
Yeah, I rolled into basic training underweight and rolled out at an ideal weight according to the numbers, but I looked badly thin when I got out of the picture of me 3 days out of basic training. I looked ridiculous. Like my head looked like it was a giant pinpoint, like from So I Married an Actor. Hey, look at his head. It's big enough to have its own weather systems. Like that big on my skinny little twig-like body. It was terrible. It took me better part of 8 years to gain enough weight to match the size of my head after I got out of basic training. Like, it was a whole thing.
I looked like a corpse-like Cardassian. Like when I came out, you could see, not only could you see my cheekbones, which are up here, you could see how they caved in. You can see all the ridges for my brows. You can see my cranial. You can actually. My mom freaked out. She cried. You could see the sutures in my skull. Like if it wasn't for the healthy pallor that I looked, you would think that I had just been in prison isolation for like 2 years, not allowed to do anything, and they were barely feeding me. Like I was. Like I'm just generally a big guy. I always have been. Right now it's worse because heart problems, health problems, etc. But even at my leanest, I was like 173 pounds at 5'10". But because of how thick and dense my bones are and stuff, it was just skin, bones, and muscle. But like
Charlotte, get off the camera. I'm sorry.
Still an extra large shirt because of my shoulders. I was still like my feet were these flipper things. Like it's just I should not have been that weight. Like that whole weight chart for them is just bonkers.
Yeah.
One of the things my daughter likes to do, and I keep telling her not to do it, is to come in and photobomb while I'm streaming.
Oh yeah.
I made it very clear to her: do not do this. It's not okay. At least one session, she always has to poke her head in just enough so we can see her, and then off she goes. So she just put in her appearance.
I thought it was an episode of The Ring for a minute. I saw this little girl come behind you, and I'm like, "Oh no, she's flying in from space."
Kronk, you know how I feel about that movie, right? You know what will happen if I will be out of here faster than you. Like where did he go? He's like, he's not handling that. I don't do horror. I'm out. Like, no, out.
You and the chair just roll into the background, tumble away.
Yeah, I will fly. I will. I will be out. I can tell you, as the parent of 6 children, if you ever find the magic of getting them to not do the one thing you've asked them to do, please bottle that. Sell that. My kids, the last of my kids is about to be out in about a year. So but it won't matter. I will still take that just out of nostalgia because I want to know how that works because I ain't got it yet.
Say you figure it out. Let me know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be figuring that out.
I think
I've been working
that's
on this
the
now for a
actual
couple
great
of years.
barrier. Yeah, that's the great barrier. That's where we're gonna go.
Yep.
God may not need a spaceship, but God needs to know the answer to that question. Let me tell you what.
All right, so to circle back around to the game here for a minute, one of the things that we should definitely talk about quickly is safety measures. As in, does anybody have any? Going once?
Yeah. Captain, you go first.
So I generally tend. It's a good way to put this. And so far with you gaming, I've never had the negative experience to worry about. There's certain things I just don't like. Like I like the general feeling of, like, 1, we're going in the right direction. 2, I don't feel like we've ever been Agatha Christie. I always find I don't mind having to figure things out. I do just like having to figure out things that there's no way we could have ever known. As for safety measures, I like the bad guys to lose. I like certain types of violence to. Like, there's some violence I don't mind. Regular, standard, action, fair violence, great. Mm-hmm. Horrible, systemic, crappy violence that reminds me too much that we got way too much work to do and things to fix. I mean, my day to day, like if I wanted horror shows, I could pick up extra shifts. Like I work at a law firm that deals with domestic violence and landlord-tenant law. Like, other than adding in criminal stuff, I get bad. So,
and that's one of the things about me as a GM is that, if it's something that people generally consider icky, like you wouldn't want to do this with a bunch of strangers at a convention, I'm probably not going to spring that on you.
Yeah. And also,
I'm not going to make you role play a love scene. Yeah. Things like that.
Right.
Well, also, you're open to getting message. That's the one thing I always point out. As a safety measure, I think whether it's public acknowledgement, like throwing the X or whatnot, or just pinging you while we're gaming, like, I think those are important measures. I think being open to communicating about whether or not something is something we're comfortable with, because not everybody's always comfortable with things. Like, I know for a fact I will go off about certain things that I later have to. I go off about them in a general fashion, but I realize I often have to individualistically apologize to someone because I may have offended where they're from. Like, my family, a lot of people in my family are religious. I'm not religious. And as long as no one ever makes me angry, I don't get really anti-religious. But then if I get really angry because someone's doing something, then I turn into a giant jackhole. But I try not to be that person because I know, again, people are people. We're organized. We're together. We're also supposed to be a community. We're supposed to be helping each other. So best way to help each other is to acknowledge what each other is and work through it. That's how you fix problems. Although sometimes I do think dropping a big giant mountain on things fixes it too. That's a certain other behavior that I try to keep in check.
Well, death cures everything.
Yeah. Hey.
Generally.
Accuracy by volume. But no, it's bad. It's bad. Don't hurt me. Peace. But no, I think talking about content, being open about conversations, and also having conversations where they need to be, where they need to be offline or in the eye. Like, sometimes uncomfortable conversations should be in the eye, because that way, everybody, once communicated, 2 people see it normalized. So I think a good safety measure is just being open to, hey, if something bugs you, call out. Like, there is zero wrong with saying, hey, this is an uncomfortable territory. So that's me.
Any other thoughts?
I'm right in step with that. I think as far as the specific, I am really not keen, and it doesn't sound like it's going to come up. But one of my golden rules in gaming is specific and dedicated violence towards children. I don't care for on camera. Like,
Absolutely.
if a villain's going to do something bad to a city, and you know there's children there, as long as that happens off camera, that's just the game. That's a villain doing villain things. But I don't want to see.
No.
I don't want to see those things on camera or in the game. I don't want to interact with that in any fashion. And I think largely, if I were to use movies to kind of describe types of violence, action violence, fine. Saw, not my thing. I personally can get a little weird about horror, but I will simply let you know if it's pushing me to an edge. I wouldn't necessarily cut that off, because as much as I have some issues with it, Kronk will tell you I am addicted to it at the same time. Like, I have this weird thing. Like, we went to see the Blair Witch when that came out, and quite honestly, I am the one who wanted to see it, because I just wanted to see this movie. Like, I had this need to see that, because I love stories and I love storytelling, and I thought, no doubt, that was a masterclass in telling a story in a specific way and using the medium in a way that quite honestly hadn't been done before. But at the same time, it scared me stupid. Like, I still have nightmares from watching that movie. And Kronk and my co-host Josh, I would not let them leave my house until an hour and a half after the sun came up, because I was that freaked out. Like, I wouldn't, like, no, you're staying.
It was an all-nighter.
Yeah, it was like, you're staying here. I wasn't going to sleep. Nobody was sleeping. It was like you're all staying here. And then of course, because that's the way Kronk is, as he was leaving, I thought I was all done. I was locking up the house. It was like 9 o'clock in the morning, getting ready to go to bed. I'm walking through my living room, and he's outside staring in my window. and so I didn't sleep for another 48 hours, but yeah. But all that to say, if I had an issue, if we were going down a vein that was pushing me to a point where I was not going to be uncomfortable, I would let you know. I'd send you that. I'd send you something. I'm very open. If something's going to bother me, I will simply find a polite way to say, hey, can we ease on X, Y, or Z? That's just me, and I would hope that if I'm doing something, especially where I'm playing a character who happens to be fairly faith and spiritual based, though it's a fictional faith and spirituality, some terminology and phraseology may come from various cultures and standards. I'm going to do my best to spread that out so it's no one tradition, because I don't want to highlight any one tradition or put any one tradition in a bad light either. But I think that Star Trek did a great job of showing, even in this high science, fairly secular galactic world, there are people who do have faith, and that's not a bad thing. But at the same time, they can't be allowed to take that to a level where they're controlling other people, a la Kai Wynn, or abusing other people, a la the Power Wraiths and Gold Cop. So I think that was, again, just a masterclass in how to kind of show those traditions and those cultural aspects that can be religion or can be spirituality. And I'm kind of hoping to bring that out with this character in some way that kind of rides that Major Kira kind of line.
Yeah, I think that'll actually be bringing something really nice into the game that we haven't had before. Because I think that as far as our real life point of view goes, I think that me, Robert, and Eric are not too far apart in terms of, our personal beliefs, which, now we're encountering a God thing. How do we react to that? Well, I'm the GM. I don't need to worry about it. I just throw that up. I throw things out there, and you guys get to react. But but it will be really cool having a character involved who's actually able to to take that and look at it from a different perspective, and see how that bounces off, the different characters and the story and things like that.
I just want to be the first Starfleet to run into a cuddly, happy, everything's cool god thing. That's just like, hey, no, you do you, boo. Like, I want that one. I want the one that gives me a couple cherries and then I just move on with my day. They don't want to kill me. They don't want to blow up my ship. They don't want to take things. They want to rule the galaxy. They don't want to just be an ungodly prick for no reason. Like, I just want the one that's just like, no. Here, head on the lap. We're going to watch a movie. Okay. Yeah, I want that one.
That's what the holodeck's for.
That's right. Like, there's probably like this just weird thing. You go on the holodeck one day and you just see Hobbs just laying with his head in Hephaestus's lap watching a movie. It's like, I tried Aphrodite. He gave me a look, so I'm just gonna keep my head here. He's got really nice thighs, so it's all good.
Well, when you did actually go to Organia and meet them briefly,
they were nice. I thanked them.
They actually asked permission to come aboard.
Yeah, I made note of that.
They would really
loudly. Well, but Hobbs was like, wait, they're asking you to come on board? These ones are great so far. These ones are great. I wasn't thinking of 6 different war crimes to pull on them at all.
Right. I know, like with safety, as far as safety goes, I do a lot of convention games. So, you're dealing with strangers, it's a very quick setup. My rule of thumb is always keep it track.
Yep.
Track will go places that are intellectually uncomfortable, possibly emotionally uncomfortable, but it's to make you think. Make you go outside of the box.
And they paint the box a different color.
Right.
Like racism was about which side of you is white or black, not about the actual. And I like that dynamic too. Makes me feel safe if everything isn't real world, even if it is.
Right.
It should be Trek different.
Yeah.
I like the way you put that.
Well, it's also always expansive instead of reductive. It's like, when they're done, it may have been in a box, but now the box is 20% bigger or 30% bigger, or there's more depth to it, or there's more. Like, I mean, it's not to get preachy, people, but it's like life is supposed to be. You're supposed to run into new things that you don't know, and then learn from it, and then move on and get bigger and better and happier.
Right.
Mind you, I'm supposed to be some weird, fringy, out of the world guy. Remember, Boy Scout, Marines, like those scary communist organizations. Yeah. Anyways,
it's like
I'm rating the rant. I go off on stuff. Sorry.
DS9 was a great example. Just as a kid of the '80s who grew up while the troubles in Ireland were still making news on a regular basis, and when YouTube would cut a song whenever a bad thing would happen, kind of thing, or shortly thereafter a bad thing would happen. Growing up in that environment, to have a show like DS9 at the time when we're still having all these problems in the Middle East, and they were again right at the forefront in our daily news, it was a very interesting way to showcase those types of issues by, like you said, Troy, by keeping it tracked, by being real world but different, so it was safe to talk about it. And part of that is not leaning on any one specific tradition enough, or so much so that it got to be an issue. They really got to talk about the concerns, the difficulties, the positives, and the negatives of intelligence gathering organizations, because we got to see the Obsidian Order, we got to see Section 31, we got to see the Romulan version thereof, the Tel Shiar. Because we get to see all these things, we got to really have some really interesting and frank ideas and discussions about those organizations, what they mean, what they could mean, what they should mean. How far off the rails are they? How close to the rails are they? Could they actually be redeemed? All of those things are kind of up for grabs, and I think Trek did a great job of opening the discussion without solving the problem. And I think that's really what makes Trek is we need to have the discussions in a safe way that doesn't feel too preachy, but at the same time, we're going to preach a little bit, because there are some things that as a very good friend of mine is fond of saying, Nazis need to be punched. He's not a violent person, but Nazis need to be punched. Take that as you will.
We can go down a whole rabbit hole right there, but I don't think we want to.
No.
There was an episode. Let's just all remember when it was all said and done. And they were all like, yeah, no, he screwed up. Like they were like, yes, we kept that person way up here on this nice little pedestal. Oh, after this, no. They're over here now. They're now a lesson. They're now a lesson.
Yep. Yeah. One that's not being allowed to run for election. I'll stop. We're not going down the rabbit hole.
We can save that for in a couple of minutes when we do the thing we usually do.
We're live, right? Okay, got it.
Yeah, we're live. No, if you want to go down that particular rabbit hole with me, friend me on Facebook, and then just keep in mind that if your point of view disagrees with mine to a certain extent, that conversation won't last long. So, anyway, enough of the real world politics. We'll just leave that at that. I think that's a good safety measure for everybody. Is keep it Trek.
Well,
I like that a lot.
Awesome job teaching things. I mean, Jesus.
So and also I agree that on-camera things against children are off limits. They always have been. I don't think that's cool. I don't want to see it. No. I don't want to see it on TV. I don't want to role play it. It's not fun. It's that's just not me. So I don't think we need to worry about that too much. I tend to be, in terms of content, pretty much action oriented, or within the specific genre or game that we're playing, and I stick with that. I know there have been some creepy incidents over the last few years that have happened at conventions. That's just not, that's not me as a GM.
We tend to stay. Everything I've seen with you since I played with you, we pretty much tend to stay around TVPG.
Yeah, I try to.
Even if we have uncomfortable issues, like if anyone pushes anything in a slightly odd direction, sometimes it might sometimes be me. But I do a really good job of making sure they point out war crimes are bad. No matter how creative one is, war crimes are bad.
He keeps bringing that up because one of the plot lines we dealt with was that getting back to Mal Assault, who had him captive for a year, was trying to develop a virus that would wipe out the Cardassians, entirely. And they started with the virus that had wiped out that planet in DS9. Bashir was there when they discovered that. So it came from the Gamma Quadrant. So they had started with that, and they were trying to engineer it so that it would wipe out all Cardassians. And so we ended up having this minor plot line about stopping them from wiping out Cardassia with that.
Well, also the virus they were using may have came from my chief medical officer, who initially jury-rigged it, said they couldn't use it because it made it where we just kill all human life, including, augments. And so you got Troy Bachman's got really good ground. Long as you don't create a virus that can kill anybody, targeted specifically only by species, you're a step up from my very talented last chief medical officer, who, by the way, did that without prompting. I was not involved.
As I recall, she was actually a human herself, wasn't she?
Yeah. Which that was a completely other issue that we had to
so,
the counselor.
So she created a virus that would wipe out her own species. Good on you.
Although under duress, she was a prisoner at the time. because
Right.
Salt kidnapped my chief medical officer off my ship.
Well,
Yep.
Had a bad day.
Yeah, that was a fun one. So anyway, I think that we're running out of time. We've been up for an hour and 55 minutes now. We've actually had a decent number of people in the chat, so that's pretty cool.
Cool.
Especially for being a Wednesday.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you all
The
for joining.
plan is to go every other week. I do need to talk to Rob, though, because he said something about him doing something on a Wednesday at the end of the month. I don't know if he meant that it would be in our same time slot. So either we're going to be on a strict every other week schedule, or it's going to be the first and third Wednesdays of the month. And I'll be able to get back with you and let you know what's going on as far as that goes. Again, I'll have to talk to Rob again a little bit more to figure that one out. The other thing I'm going to say is that on my channel, we're pretty lax as far as keeping to the schedule. This being Cybernation Uncensored, they have a lot of streams, they have a lot of content, they have a lot of viewers, which means that we need to be reliable. So as long as everybody's cool with that, that'll be awesome. So
That should be good to go.
I do have a couple scheduling things happening in November that I got to talk to you about, but other than that, yeah, I'm good.
yeah, and that's cool. As long as we know ahead of time, something's coming up, we can either say, we're going to postpone a session, or, oh, we can go on without this person for a session. We do things like that all the time, and that's fine. What was on my other game, the Fallout game, after we moved to Cybernation Uncensored, I had one player who would be like within an hour of starting on multiple occasions, like, oh, I'm sorry, I got to work, or I'm sorry, I've got to take my cat to the vet in Spokane, and eventually it's like, I'm sorry, we kind of told you when we made this move to Cybernation Uncensored, we can't do that anymore, so we ended up, things happen. And that's why we ended up getting a new player. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there, and that the lax schedule I've been keeping with this particular stream, it's going to be more structured and definitely more on time. Lockdown, definitely. So that said, let's go ahead and do our outros. And there's a fly buzzing around my head. Let's do our outros, and let's go ahead and do it in the opposite order of what we started. So, Eric, tell us about yourself.
Eric Leonard, and I'll be playing McGrib. I look forward to getting to know the new players in the group here very, very soon. And I'm a public lands professional, so you'll find me in America's national parks, not in a game store. And I'm on Twitter, at Freevodar. I won't explain that. And I look forward to playing, in 2 weeks.
And when you say parks, you do mean multiple parks.
Yeah, multiple parks. If you find yourself in Southeast Colorado, you might see me.
As in, you actually run 4 of them.
Yes, not ones you've heard of, but little ones in Southeast Colorado, and it's a living. And America has a really cool national park system, and I've been very fortunate to work in lots of bits and pieces of it. And one of the reasons I play in Darren's Fallout game is I have some experience with nuclear apocalypse.
You do. As a matter of fact, about 5 years ago, as we were driving across the country, me and the family, we were moving from Massachusetts back to my home state of Washington. We stopped in and saw him at the Missile, which was an old Cold War missile silo, where he showed me the place. He showed me the bunker. Very interesting. I wish we would have gotten pictures. You probably have pictures, right?
I've got a picture of us at the gate that
Yeah, you got that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And then I have lots of pictures of the site, because the thing that staff get to do that the public isn't able. The Minuteman missile silo is much smaller than you think it is. It's a shotgun. It's a giant shotgun barrel that's only 12 feet wide but 80 feet deep, and staff got to go down inside that. And so I have some pictures inside the silo, and that's a singular place to consider, what America is capable of.
Yep. All right.
Yep.
Moving on. Troy.
All right. I am Troy Mepians. I am going to be playing Dr. Levi Bachman. I am a freelance writer, author, game designer, dad, husband, sometimes sane individual, but that comes and goes.
Okay, Lewanika, did I say it right that time?
You did. You got it perfectly.
Awesome.
I'm Lewanika. I am one of the co-hosts of Tabletop Journeys. I like to think of myself as a small-town kid who lived in the big city for a short time, but much prefer somewhere just in between. As a writer, a content creator in general, and a lifetime gamer, looking forward to this. Sitting down to game with old friends like Kronk, new friends like Troy, and Eric and Robert and Darren that we've met in the last couple of weeks. I have no doubt that this is going to be an amazing time, and I can't wait to do it. And to have an audience that gets to go on these journeys with us. That's what it's all about.
Awesome. Robert.
Robert Emerson. I play Captain Barton Hobbs. Freelance creative. I live in Southern Oregon. Work for a private nonprofit. Been gaming since 1980. Been freelancing since 2000. You can find some of my stuff in a variety of places. Green Ronin, Paizo. Oh heck. We'll just stick with those two. Those within the last 5 years. So, fiction, game design, game development. Briefly ran a magazine. But I hide in a nice little rural town in Southern Oregon. And by nice, I mean it's mostly okay. And so far, no one I know has been killed in recent years. So, hey, enjoy yourself. Thanks for coming.
All right, Kronk.
My name is Kronk. I'm playing Savar, the son of Varg. I'm an artist and animator, and you can find me on Facebook at probably about 5 or 10 pages with the word Kronk in it. So if you do just a search, you'll find them all. And I'm really looking forward to playing this game with everybody, and it's nice to meet those I don't know. Lee, always a pleasure to see you, and we'll see everybody 2 weeks.
All right. And I am Darren Drader. In addition to this game, I also run Fallout Pacific Northwest, which you will find at 8 o'clock on Cybernation Uncensored on Saturday nights, on the first and third Saturday night of every month. I'm also a game designer. I've worked on D&D. I've worked with many of the major publishers. I also do my own publishing, and I could go on about that forever, and I'm not going to bore you with that. I live in a small town, Pullman, Washington, which is the home of the WSU Cougars. As a matter of fact, if you catch any of our games this year, any of our home games anyway on TV, there's a chance you might see me on the sidelines because I'm also part of the chain crew.
Nice.
Gaming in one form or another is basically my entire life. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and call tonight, and we will see you in a couple weeks. Later, everybody.
Yeah, everybody.